Awesome.
Nailed it.
See you around. You build that they will come.
Right.
So that's not the case anymore.
Through that suffering and through that community, I became a better Catholic.
Welcome back. I'm Darnell Miller, and today I'm here in Dallas at the Evangelical Catholic Conference, Priests for an Apostolic Age. And today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Father Sean Loomis. Father Sean, thank you for being here.
My name is Father Sean Loomis.
That's
and
awesome.
It's nice to be here and to meet you.
Perfect. And so we're going to get into that in just a moment. But the first thing I wanted to talk about is we're talking about the conference is called Priests for an Apostolic Age. What does that mean for you?
For me, to be a priest in an apostolic age is a total change of mindset and a reevaluation of how we live and express our faith. So I think for many of us, most of us, we've inherited a strong Catholic tradition. So it's not something we really had to work for or to build. And that has led, even especially in Western civilization, to a kind of consumerist approach to the way we engage the church and also our own understanding of a relationship with Jesus Christ, which if you think about consumerism, it's very non-committal and it requires very little, but it expects very high.
Yep.
And we have to transition out of that mindset and to begin to ask the question, what does it mean to be in mission? And what responsibility towards that do I have? What has God given me to endow me for that very specific purpose? And how can I do that as a body, like the mystical body of Christ? Because no one person has all of it, right?
Yeah.
So I need you to do your part and you need me to do mine. And so to begin thinking along those lines and ask those questions, I think, is what it means today to live in an apostolic age.
And I know it requires an amount of intentionality when you're seeking to reach communities who either aren't represented in the faith or who you may or may not know. And that's something that you have, that you've spent time doing with the deaf community. So can you tell us a little bit of how you got into that as a ministry and what you've learned from that experience?
Sure. So to begin with the intentionality, right? So the intentionality requires first seeing. You have to see the person, you have to see the need, you have to see Christ who's waiting, to engage the bride in that way. And so the church kind of did the seeing for me. So when I was in my first week at St. Charles Seminary in Philadelphia, the academic dean pulled me in and said, hey, listen, there's a deaf community of Catholics and they need access to the sacraments and to the faith, but there are very few who are able to do that to this very specialized community. So do you mind beginning to learn their language and their culture? And so for me, I didn't really have anything to do with it initially. I just had to say yes to the invitation. And I took it as an expression of God's will for my life, which was deeply mysterious. And then I ran with it. And what I discovered is that God blessed it. And that became very obvious. I picked up the language very quickly. I understood the culture. I fell in love with them. They fell in love with me. And it was this beautiful match that was totally unexpected. And so once I was ordained, I was immediately assigned into deaf ministry. And so I've been a priest now for 10 years, and I've been serving the deaf community 10 years as a priest and then 6 years as a seminarian. So that's how it happened, yeah.
Something struck me as really interesting that you said that you learned their language and their culture. And that's interesting because that's not something I'd thought about. When we think of ASL, I think, oh, that's English, and we're just using hand signs to do it. But that's not the case. So how did that realization or that distinction that it is a different language, that it is a different culture, help you understand how to better serve that community? And how can we take that lesson as we approach other communities?
Sure, specifically in the context of an apostolic age, right? So the first thing any apostle or missionary should do is to listen. And part of listening is to take all internal assumptions and put them on the shelf for now. And to say, I'm just going to walk into this situation and I'm going to let the situation speak to me. And so what I learned by doing that, by just showing up and not trying immediately to transform, to change, or to influence in any way, but just to show up and to be present to, was that I assumed, for example, that sign language was universal, that deaf people across the whole globe signed one common language. False. I also assumed that my culture as a hearing individual was the same as theirs, and the only difference between us was that they just couldn't hear. And then that was also immediately dispelled as false. And so I realized, you know what? They have their own value system. They have their own idiomatic expressions. They have their own art form. They have their own way of interacting socially with one another. So, for example, I learned this the hard way, was that when you're trying to exit a social situation, maybe it's a banquet, maybe it's a party, some sort of gathering, one does not simply say, okay, I have to go. Thank you for everything. This has been a lot of fun. I hope to see you again soon. And then you leave. It takes at least an hour. And to shortcut that process is viewed as deeply offensive.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very cold, it's very abrupt, it's very harsh. And so if you don't know that, then with all the good intentions in the world, you might actually offend a whole pool of people that you're trying to engage Christ with. So for me, it was about really just listening and beginning to see that sign language is not just English in motion. It has its own systems, rules, grammar, structures, and I have a lot to learn. And so once I can do that and then really adopt that culture and appreciate that culture for what it is, can I then begin to bring Christ with that culture and language as a medium?
Yeah. I liked what you said. I have a lot to learn. And I think that's something that everybody should operate under, that no matter how much we think we know about our experiences in our world around us, we still have a lot to learn, and that should influence how we approach everybody.
It should, and it takes time, right? So I think a lot of us were very much in a rush and we like results quickly, but that is not how evangelization works. That is not how Jesus Christ worked, and that's not how the apostles worked. They took years to do things, and so it is a process. And so if the deaf community, for example, to stick with this particular group, is to encounter the person of Christ, that's not a rush job, because it's not a consumer commercial environment, right? It's a relational one. And so it takes relationships, and an authentic one isn't cheapened by hastened interaction.
Absolutely. It sounds like the work you're doing is transformational, not just for the community you're serving, but also for you. So I want to thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk with me today. And I'm really curious to learn more about this, what you're doing, and just kind of rethinking how I understand encounter and evangelization in my day-to-day life too. So thank you so much for talking with us.
You are welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you for watching.
See you around.